All right, joining us now, he's a good friend of the show. I've known him now, man, we're going on a decade. We've known each other. He is the head coach at UNF, fresh off a successful tournament weekend in Jacksonville, including wins over Iowa. They're 9-5 on the season. They're getting set to go out to Tempe in a big tournament up there. And I speak of my good friend Jeff Conrad, joining us here on In the Circle. Sir, how you doing?
Elo, good to be back with you. It's been it feels like it's been a long time since we've chatted, but I know you're busy this time of year.
You're busy too. You're the head coach. This is your second full season now, as in that chair as the head coach. So I want to start with that before we talk about this year's team. What has been that adjustment like for you? Because we've obviously last time we spoke on the pod, you had just gotten the job and you had these ideas. Now that you've gone through it a year and you're into your second year, what has it been like from that adjustment standpoint?
Well, I would say probably the biggest thing is just getting all those firsts out of the way. It's nice not to have, hey, this is the first time you're doing this, or it's the first time you're experiencing this. That's probably been the nicest thing from year one to year two. I think kind of knowing what to expect and having an understanding of, different things in different situations has been, one of the real positives going from year one to year two. And in my situation, it was probably a little bit unique in terms of that I had been here for a while as an assistant, so I kind of knew the landscape. I kind of knew, a little bit about how the university runs, what the program was like, where we were short, where we needed to improve, things like that. So I think I probably had a slight advantage in year one in that regard, but the old adage, year one's never easy, definitely is a true thing. I mean, it's an adjustment. I mean, it's even being a part of this program for as long as I was, and the role is changing. I mean, everything is a little bit different in that regard.
What was one thing you learned last year? They're like, okay, moving forward, I got to remember this to either not do it or something like, hey, next time I could do it this way, or things like that. That really stood out.
I think probably just the time management side of things. I mean, I didn't, going into it, I really didn't know from a time management standpoint what was feasible, what's not feasible. And I think I, kind of went into it like maybe more of like a CEO, hire people to do things and just kind of be the organizer of everything. And I think coming through year one and going into year two, I think one of the things that I realized with that is, the time commitment is pretty big, but you can find ways to make time and get creative with different things. And I think I've been able to be a little bit more as a more bit of a CEO in that regard, but also like I've been back involved full time with the hitters now, where I wasn't involved with them at all last year. So that's been good. I think, yeah, just the time management aspect of things. I mean, it's a lot more, it's obviously a lot heavier on the administrative side. There's no more showing up to work and then spending your day out at the field. You're doing a lot of stuff behind the desk and different things like that. So I really wasn't sure what to expect in that regard. Especially knowing in our situation that we had needs and things that we had to do, we had to improve on, and fundraising was going to be a big, part of that. So just not being sure how I was going to be able to delegate all that time. But, going through it year one, I would say that's probably the biggest change is wasn't involved with the hitting at all last year. And now I'm back in with that full time. I'd like to be able to create a little more balance if I could, to where I could be with the hitters full time and still feel like I've got time to be in the bullpen, still have time to be with the defense and things like that. I think that's still probably the area where I'm still trying to figure things out. But, as you get deeper into the season, more experience under your belt, it definitely seems like it gets a little easier and things start to make a little more sense.
Running the offense, was that a decision you just made because at the end of the day, that's part of your DNA, and you just felt like I just have to be involved in that area? Because I know you love teaching hitting since I've known you. Was that part of that decision process?
Yeah. I mean, no question. I mean, I definitely missed it. I mean, it was hard to go from being the voice when it came to hitting and running the offense here to all of a sudden after 8 years, becoming the head coach and not saying anything. That was tough. That was challenging. But yeah, I mean, I just looking back on it, I think, one of your jobs as the head coach is to constantly be evaluating the program and self-scouting your own team and looking at areas that we've got to do better, areas we've got to improve. And I just thought looking at the offensive numbers and things that we did last year, it wasn't where they needed to be. And, felt like that was something I just, A, for myself, I wanted to be back a part of, but B, I thought just for the betterment of the team, I felt like it was going to be an important thing for me to get back involved with.
Yeah, because that's a big part of who you are. And we see that in coaches across the board. I mean, UCS football coach Gus Malzahn just recently mentioned he's back play calling because that's who he is. And he thought,
Right.
well, last year I'll give it up. I need to oversee more things. But then he realized it's not who I am. That I need to be involved in the right. And you have to be true to who you are to be successful in this industry, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's ironic. I mean, you mentioned UCF and football, and I actually had my good friend is the play-by-play guy for Michigan football, and obviously with Jim Harbaugh leaving and Sharon Moore, taking over, and had an interesting conversation with him recently, just in regards of, yeah, I mean, he's been there and he's called plays and stuff, but when you have to wear all these different hats, everything looks a little bit different. So I think that's a really good example. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it was part of my DNA. I do think that and my ability to recruit were probably the two biggest reasons that I was appealing for this job. And I think I just felt like it was something for this was a team that we thought had a chance to be special if we could add some specific pieces, some specific parts. And I thought just we have to get back to being that good offensive club that I think we've kind of created that reputation of being. And then obviously improving in the other areas that we needed to improve to try and become ultimately a championship club.
You're 9-5 on the season. One of the things you've also had to handle as a head coach is deal with weather and Mother Nature. It's been altering your games all in Florida, like everybody else in the state. And this weekend was no different this past weekend because you're co-hosting with Jacksonville a tournament. The weekend before that, you were hosting a tournament, also had affected by Mother Nature. What has that been like now to be a head coach and involved in that decision process, working with facilities, working with the opposing head coach, and try to deal when is rain going to stop and not going to run? Because everybody in the state's been dealing with this the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially being a program down here in the South where we play, we host tournaments, we play a lot of games at home early in the season. I think that was something that obviously when I was with Renee at UCF and they did quite a bit of, and she got me experience with scheduling that I was somewhat exposed to. But I think until that hat is firmly on your head, you don't really understand what fully goes into it. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, there were several times over, the past couple of weekends when we've dealt with weather here the past 2 weekends, where you're spending more time figuring things out for the other team in terms of like their cage time and different things with altering schedules than you are for your own team, in some regards. So a lot of challenges with that, but we're really fortunate that, we've got a good administration here that, helps, and good grounds crew, good field guys that take care of, the field really well and give us a good opportunity to get in as many games as we possibly can. But that's definitely been something that's been, one of the early challenges in terms of becoming a head coach.
Now, you went 3-0 this week. You mentioned Renee Gillespie, obviously, who worked with at UCF, helped get you in the door in your career. You got to face her. Now, you faced her before in previous years, so this was nothing necessarily like strange or unique, but you got to face her as the head coach versus the head coach, but you beat him 6-1, had a big rally late in the game, great pitching. What was that like being opposed to her in the opposite dugout in your home park, but then you beat her? And obviously, I'm sure she congratulated you, but that was unique there, kind of a full circle moment for you.
Yeah, it really was. And even, like that whole staff back from 2015 UCF, obviously I'll still see Renee out recruiting, and from time to time I'll, have contact with Hillary, from that staff, and even, Tiff, who's no longer in the game, we still speak from time to time. And, she's always, she kind of reached out to me and was like, hey, I could be a great sounding board for you now that I'm out of the sport, and things like that. So we've always kept in contact. But yeah, I mean, it was, we played her a couple years ago when she was at Iowa and I was here as the associate head coach, and they beat us. I think it was 3-1. I want to say like in Leesburg, but unique opportunity, having a chance to go against someone that I have a great deal of respect for. I mean, I know every time I see her and we talk about it, I mean, I always thank her for giving me the opportunity. I mean, she likes to talk about it's you who created this opportunity for yourself. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, me being a travel ball coach, if she doesn't give me that opportunity, who knows if I'm even sitting here at this point. So very thankful, for everything. But even as we talked a little bit leading up to the game, and then once we got within that 24 hours, we kind of left it to when we saw each other in person. Um, but even just talking to her a little bit about the lead up to the game, and she was asking for different things, and and I always told her, don't worry, I got it. I was trained under a good coach. So so we got some laughs about it early in the week. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I mean, it felt good to be able to have to oppose her as with my own team and be able to win the game. But yeah, I mean, she was the classy lady she's always been. Afterwards, very gracious after the game, congratulated me, said she thinks I got a really good team, and keep going, keep doing what I'm doing. And it was great to see. It was great to see her again, and but really really proud of our kids and the way they competed this weekend.
Yeah, and not only, I mean, she comes to your tournament. Think
Hmm.
about that for a moment. She's coming to your tournament. I
Yeah.
mean, if I would have told 2015 Jeff Conrad, hey, 9 years from now, Coach Gillespie's going to come to a tournament you're hosting, I mean, what would have come to your mind if I had brought that up?
It wasn't even anything I was even contemplating probably at that point. I mean, I was just grateful for the opportunity, to be there, to be with a great group of kids who went out and accomplished great things. And I knew I was having a lot of fun doing it. And, um, I can remember her having a conversation with me at one point, like, you're ready to move on. You're going to do great things with this. And I don't know even at that point if I believed her, because it was one season, and I never really thought about being a head coach or felt like that was something I had to do, or even really, at that point I thought it was something I wanted to do. So yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's you asking that is the first time I've ever thought of it, but it definitely wouldn't have been something that was on my mind in 2015.
Trust me, it was on my mind when I saw the schedule and all that worked out. And, you mentioned how she said that you got a good team. Well, Victor, obviously my co-host, executive producer of the podcast, was there. He was calling games for Iowa. It was his first time to your facilities. And
Mhm.
I was texting with him for updates to see how it was going because I was doing other stuff. And he was telling me three things. He was impressed with the facilities, number one. Number two, he was impressed with your arms that you've got, which we'll get to in a minute. But he was also impressed by your athleticism that you've got. He thinks this is the best UNF team he's seen from an athletic standpoint. I know that was something that was your goal, is to be
Yeah.
more athletic,
Yeah.
kind of like some of those UCF teams from Coach Gillespie, and even now with Coach Ball Malone. But just talk about this team there, because he was very impressed in leaving Jacksonville with seeing you in person.
Yeah, I mean, as you're in the off season and you're looking at this on paper and you're building this team and you're looking at different needs and areas where we need to improve and things like that. And, as we're going through that process through the portal and different things like that. And, you know, I at one point paused and I looked at it and I was like, this has a chance to be a really good team, right? But you never know how it looks until you get everything together and you start looking at it. And the game's not played on paper, it's played on the field. So it was something that I thought, looking at it, I was like, this team has a chance to be really good. I think quietly to myself, um, I was here for the team a couple years ago that won 43 games, which was a school record. Obviously it was a great team, but I think this team is more talented than that team was. I think this team is definitely deeper than what that team was. And I think those were things that we really wanted to improve on, the athleticism, like you touched on. I knew we had to get better in the circle. And we've always been, I think, a pretty good offensive club. I think if you were to ask people, they would point to the different areas where where UNF is a little bit vulnerable. Is from time to time they'll kick the ball around a little bit. Maybe their pitching isn't striking fear in a lot of people. They can score some runs, but their recipe for winning is to try and outscore you. And really looking at it, I mean, I just felt strongly that if we're going to be a championship club, we're going to have to pitch and we're going to have to play defense. And I think those were the two areas that we really focused heavy on, not only through the portal and recruiting, but also throughout the fall. We're fielding it really well, not making a lot of mistakes. Knock on wood, we're getting good pitching. I don't think we've had a game yet this year where we've played a complete game, but I think we're getting to the point where we're clicking on 2/3 of the game, and I think you got to be hitting on 2/3 in order to have a chance to win. So it's been pretty good. I've been pretty happy with this group.
Well, the thing that impressed me about your team is you had that big doubleheader with Florida at home, which brings a lot of hoopla. Anytime you play Florida, you bring big crowds, it's just all unique. Things didn't go the way you would have liked in that doubleheader. A lot of times, teams will have a hangover as a result of that and carry that over to the weekend. That did not happen with your team. They were able to put that behind them real quick. That, to me, at least from the outside, showed a lot of maturity of being able to put things behind them and staying even keel. Is that what happened there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we have a veteran group, right? I mean, we've got kids that have played a lot of softball here at UNF, kids that have, been through a lot of seasons here with me personally. I think they have a good understanding of what my expectations are and what I want out of them. But we've gotten really good leadership this year. I think that's one of the things, maybe in years past that have been a little bit deficient is some of the leadership areas. We've gotten really good leadership. I'll tell you one of the big changes too, I think is, we really challenged the kids this fall in the weight room through weights and conditioning and made it as hard as it's been in the previous 8 years that I was here. And, about for the first couple of weeks, there was a lot of complaining, a lot of, this is hard. Why are we doing this? And then we got to a point in the fall where all that just disappeared. And it was just show up and go to work every day. And when that happened, I think is where things really started to turn a little bit for us. It was right around that time we played Florida State in the fall. And we had, we went down there and Florida State hung 2 on us in the first inning. They got a home run. We came back in the 4th, tied it at 2. In the 5th, we went ahead 3-2. So we're beating a team that's a top 3 team in the country at their place. At that point, pretty much starters on starters. I think I started to feel like, hey, okay, this is a pretty tough group. This is a pretty resilient group. We went in and, obviously the conference tournament this year, neutral site in Oxford, Alabama. We mapped it out from Jacksonville to Oxford, Alabama. What's the mileage? And we asked the kids from the beginning of the fall, whether it be through lifting, through running, or whatever it is, to go in and contribute something to the group to make sure that we're the last team standing. And they had to equate, I don't have the mileage memorized, but whether it was 470 miles or whatever it is, they had to do stuff to equate to that by the time, the season was done. And, our group really just, I think, really began to embrace competition, embrace things being hard, the nothing that you really, really want to work for ever is going to come easy, that whole kind of mindset. And it's a pretty resilient group. I mean, they've really answered every challenge, and they show up and they come to work every day, and they just keep their nose down, not a lot of complaining, not a lot of talking, just all about the team and trying to do something that's never been done here before.
One of the things, obviously, it stood out so far in the season's your pitching. You mentioned it. Obviously, people that follow your program is familiar with Hallie Aarons, who's still back. He's off to a great start, has a 2 ERA, has made 9 appearances, 9 starts. But you added Allison Benning. You got Allison Benning, the kid from Oregon. She's been a big weapon for you, 6 wins on the season. And you've going with a lot of relievers, too. It's more that committee staff approach. Talk about your arms that you've got here that Victor was impressed with, and I've talked to even other people that have played your team. They think you've got the arms to compete for the conference championship this year. Is this the best, most talented arms collection that you've had since you've been there?
Oh, no question. No question. I mean, and we've had some good arms. I think, Sydney Matsko transferred in a few years ago from UNC, and I think she did a really good job for us. I just, I don't know that we've had the quantity of arms that we've had in the past. Allison obviously was a big land for us in the portal. This is a kid, obviously 2 years ago, coming out of high school as a top 10 recruit in the country. You know, we'd like to joke over here in these parts. We call her Shohei Ohtani because she sits in the middle of our lineup. She does a lot of pitching for us. Um, you know, but I mean, and she's a great kid. I mean, she's been, you know, obviously it's easy to see the impact she's had on our program from a softball standpoint, but you want to talk about just a really neat kid to be around. I mean, she's a really, really good kid. So she's been a huge add to our program in that regard. Um, you know, Hallie Aarons, to me, that was the big X piece for us, right? Like 2 years ago as a sophomore, she wins 20 games, you know, and I'm coming back into my, you know, first head coaching job and I lose 10 seniors, you know, the year before, but I've got a 20 game winner coming back. So I feel pretty good about that. And then she has, you know, all kinds of health issues and things to where we basically don't even have her, you know, at all last year. And when she does come back is, you know, more or less, you know, just a shell of herself. And, you know, was just really just battling, just trying to give us whatever she could. You know, and I had a great talk with her at the end of the year that, you know, this is, you know, this being her third year, this is like the tiebreaker year, right? There's the Hallie Aarons, who as a sophomore was phenomenal, one, you know, wins 20 games. Then there's the Hallie Aarons last year who had a lot of health issues and, you know, really was struggling just to get through innings. You know, so this is the odd year. What's it going to be? Is it going to be the Hallie Aarons who was great, or is it going to be the Hallie Aarons that would, you know, that was going to struggle? And, you know, to her credit, she went out and got to work, got healthy, and has been really good for us. You know, I think a lot of people, you know, like to look at the arms we brought in, you know, whether it was Kyla Berry, who was throwing a lot as a freshman at James Madison, or Allison Benning, who was a top, you know, 10 to 15 recruit in the country 2 years ago, transferring in. To me, the X factor was Hallie Aarons coming back as Hallie Aarons. You know, when that happened, that became like the icing on the cake. You know, so I'm, you know, we haven't even talked about Ashley Connor, who threw the bulk of our innings last year, you know, and has really done a good job for us. She's kind of currently in that that number 3 role for us, so kind of more or less like a spot starter, reliever type person, but she's been really effective in that role. You know, we're looking really forward to increasing her role. Obviously, we haven't had a weekend series where we've played 5 games, so we've been able to kind of shorten our pitching staff a little bit on the weekends. This weekend will be the first weekend where we play 5 games in a weekend, so we'll need that pitching depth. You know, so with her, we mentioned Kyla Berry transferring in from James Madison. You know, she's still trying to get comfortable, I think, in her role here and figure things out. But when she does, I think she's going to just add to that depth. You know, and Cam Ponick was you know, a really highly sought after kid from out west who, you know, we're really just hoping that we can continue to allow her to be a freshman and move along at a pace that she's comfortable and what she's ready for. But she's somebody that I think, you know, in a year or two is really going to start turning heads. I mean, she's, you know, already an upper velocity kid as a young kid. And, you know, I think with her, you know, getting in there and working with Amber and, you know, just kind of refining her skills and things, I think her future is really bright.
Well, interesting about Benning, you mentioned her being a two-way player. I found it interesting. I'm curious because you've obviously got to talk to her during the process and everything. I have heard from players that have entered the portal, like we had Elena Vaughter on in the summer when she made her decision to go to South Carolina. And she said one of the big decisions was she wanted to be a two-way player consistently, wanted
Yeah.
that opportunity. Is that something you hear? Like, did Allison, you know, when you talk to Allison Benning, and that is that something that she brings up? Hey, I want to be a two-way player. Is that part of the equation in the coming? Is that something you bring up as a selling job? And hey, if you want to be a two-way player, you could get that opportunity here. How does that work? Because I've heard that is a underlining, underrated story, you know, reason that sometimes players move on from one school to another. It's not necessarily, you know, just to try something different, maybe opportunities that they can't have in position. Jordy Ball, I remember talking to Rhonda Revelle. One of the things that excited her about being in Nebraska was being a consistent two-way player, which she was not going to be at Oklahoma, really.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was a little bit of both, you know, in Allison's case. And I think obviously she wasn't throwing a ton, you know, at Oregon. She was, um, you know, definitely hitting more than she was throwing. And I think she wanted to kind of be able to do both of those things. obviously, for us, to be able to recruit a player of that caliber, I mean, I think that's something that we have to be able to offer her. But I think in Allison's case, I think the biggest thing that she was looking for was just a place where she could make a connection, feel that connection with the coaching staff, and feel comfortable. I mean, I know that was in the early conversations I had with her when she first entered the portal. That was one of the things that she and her family had mentioned to me was, coach, this isn't necessarily going to be a decision that's made about the name that's on the uniform. It's going to be a decision that's made on a place where Allison can be Allison and Allison can be comfortable. And I think to her and her family's credit, I mean, I think they stayed true to that from start to finish. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, when we're recruiting kids, we're not putting enormous or any type of huge NIL deals on the table like other schools are able to do. The things that we have to sell are, the coaching staff, the connections, the things like that. And, they stay true to that from the start of the process all the way to the very end, when pitchers hit the portal, their phone doesn't stop ringing, and when you have a kid who is a top 10 recruit in the country and everybody's looking for pitching, her phone's going to ring quite a bit, and I know she was, turning down opportunities potentially with NIL things tied to it and stuff like that. And, I give them a lot of credit where the very first thing they said is what was going to be important to them were the connections and the people. And they never veered from that, from the start to finish. So, we were fortunate to have, be able to make that connection with her. And, it was an interesting time, to be trying to recruit a player of her caliber. And I don't have a pitching coach hired yet. I don't have a, even an assistant coach hired, like just trying to kind of, establish that connection as somebody who's not going to work directly with the pitchers. Yeah, I'll have some input and I'll be involved with you on the hitting side of things. But, I think it was just a huge win, for us across the board. And she's been great. She's been a huge, huge asset to our program. And, like I said, not only a phenomenal player, but a great person.
Well, you mentioned you didn't have an assistant at the time, pitcher coach. You did since then. You made those big news, made waves in the offseason in the coaching carousel when we found out that Amber Pfizer, you hired her to bring her along. That was big. Just talk about that process of bringing somebody with her statue and and her resume and their game, and somebody that is still playing.
Yeah.
Just about her and the impact she's had coming in.
Yeah. Well, the first phone call I did make, just and with the tying everything back to 2015, you'll get a kick of this. Obviously, was to Shelby. And she did tell me, she's like, if you ever become a head coach, call me. So I had to hold true on that, and that was the first phone call I made. And obviously, she's got her life up in the Midwest now and doing really well. And she said she'd love to do it, but the check was going to have a lot of zeros at the end of it. So
that's right. Yeah.
I appreciated the honesty, but after that, I mean, Amber was somebody that I really had targeted with this position. I've been really fortunate, in my time in the softball world to make some really good connections with people who have been mentors to me. And, just having a lot of conversations with those people about, picking their brain on names and different things. And, I can remember being out in Colorado and I'm recruiting for a week and sitting at a field and having a conversation with Jen Rocha, at Oklahoma, who I got to know a little bit when she was with Tim at Florida. And, and just asked her, like, if there's one person out there that I need to go out and get, who would that person be? And one of the names that she mentioned that she thought would be really good was Amber. So I was somebody that I had really kind of, zeroed in on. We had made some contact pretty early in the process. She was playing, so, it was really hard to kind of continue to navigate through the process with her having her season going on. And, but we just kind of kept in contact and, kept in touch throughout the process. And, as her season, began to dwindle down and she started to look at, okay, well, what comes next? I would say that's when things kind of really escalated. I know she was really, obviously, with her time at Mizzou as a GA and trying to figure out what was the next step. And she was trying to figure out, was she ready? Was it time for her to take a pitching staff of her own? And I think, I think one of the things that really put her at ease was seeing the staff that I had assembled here, and knowing that I was giving her an opportunity to hit the ground running, I think was very important to her. But we probably got on a Zoom for about an hour one day and just kind of talked about, not only softball, but just more about like who I am as a person and, the different ties that, I grew up in Chicago and she's an Iowa kid and, just that Midwestern connection. And I think we really hit it off during that hour conversation. And, told her I wanted her to, really consider this opportunity. And I know I had spoken to, one of her pitching mentors, and they really spoke very highly of her and what they thought she was going to be able to do. So, with all that, it kind of really zeroed in everything on her for me. And um, she kind of reached out to me the next day, and she was, we had talked about her coming down to Jacksonville just to see the campus and spend some more time with me and things like that. And she called me the next morning and she was just like, I'm in. She's like, I think I'm in. I want to do this. So then, the next part of it, obviously, in any of these situations is, working it out with administration, obviously with her playing career, and then, making sure we're able to put her in a situation where she wants to be financially, where she can make everything work. And, credit to, Nick Morrow, our AD, and I mean, he stepped to the plate knowing how strongly I felt about, Amber, being a part of this and her belief in my vision and, wanting her to be a part of building this with me. And he did everything we needed to do to make it become a reality. So.
It's big. That's been big, and it certainly has made an immediate impact. But you mentioned the rest of the staff. You got Kayla McGorry, obviously a former player of yours. She bleeds UNF blood. If I had to bet.
Yeah.
And you've got Mario Hernandez. Just talk about the rest of the staff you have built around you.
Yeah, so Kayla, obviously interesting. I mean, I started coaching Kayla ever since she was a freshman in high school, and then obviously she played travel ball for me. And then when I made the jump to UCF is when she was going through her full making her decision basically with college, and then I ended up getting hired here, and then she ended up deciding that once I got hired that this is where she wanted to be. It was really weird last year. I felt it was like my first year in a long time being around softball and not having Kayla around. So that was interesting. But obviously, with the changes, staff sizes, things like that, that's going on with softball and baseball, we had an opportunity, and we started, feeling out different people and looking at different things, and what would be the perfect complement to this staff. And Kayla had reached out to me, and it was kind of an interesting conversation. She just was like, are you still looking for a volunteer or somebody to come in and be that third assistant? I said, I am. And she said, well, I'm going to medical school next year. And she's like, I need to get another year of softball in under my belt before that happens. She's like, I'd like to come back and be a part of your staff. So really, when we kind of started thinking about this, I mean, Kayla was somebody that was always in my mind. I mean, obviously, she's been around me, like I said, ever since she was a freshman in high school. So she knows a lot about what I'm looking for, what my expectations are, and things like that. So I thought she'd be a really good fit. She was very well respected as a player here. And I think she has a lot to offer from a softball, mentality standpoint. So I thought it was really somebody that we really had kind of had in mind, but didn't know how feasible it was going to be with what her, career goals and aspirations were. Mario, it's funny with Mario, a lot of people assume because we both grew up in Chicago that we know one another. I've heard everything that we've been friends since high school, that we played in college together, and none of those things are true. We're just both two kids from the south suburbs of Chicago. I will say the one common denominator we have is Tommy Santiago, from obviously he was previously at USF and then went on to Memphis. Tommy, obviously somebody I know really well, and Mario also knew Tommy really well. And he was somebody that I briefly knew from his stint when he was at JU, doing his volunteer year, and I was at UNF. But Mario was somebody that really just appealed to me throughout the recruiting the interview process. I mean, he was somebody that he reminded me a lot of myself. really, to be honest with you. I mean, just really strong recruiting chops. I think has a lot of really good inroads with the places that you want to be recruiting. So that was something that really appealed to me. I think in today's day and age of where college athletics are, I mean, recruiting is so important. I mean, because not only do you have to recruit the kids here, once they're here, you got to recruit them to stay. So I really wanted people that, have a real strong recruiting background. The other things that really jumped out to me with Mario is, he had a catching background, and I felt like that was something that was probably one of the bigger areas of growth within our program. Was our work with the catchers and development. We got a really young group of catchers that have a potential to be really good, but they need to be coached, they need to be developed. So his work and experience in that was something that, really appealed to me. And I think just talking to him and going through it, and he was somebody that had, obviously a lot of interest from other places. He's, got a good 5 to 6 years under his belt, and he's bounced around quite a bit. But I think for him, he really wanted to find a place that could be home and be home for a while. And I think he really believes in the vision I have for this program, the potential that this program has. And it was all three were really just a great fit for what I wanted to do and what I wanted to bring in. And I really just love the way the staff, gels together, genuinely has an appreciation for one another. It's, a staff that works really well on the field together, but also gets along, away from the field, which I think is important too. And I think the kids sense that and they really feed off it as well.
You've challenged your team early in the schedule. You're going to challenge yourself going out west here. But what's unique about your early schedule, you've seen a lot of good pitching early
Yeah.
on in the year. Florida and their youngsters in that doubleheader. FAU, they got quality arms. JMU, quality arm. Even Iowa, who you
Yeah.
beat, got quality arms there. So your
Yeah.
offensive numbers right now don't stand out, but that's because you've played a lot of competition. What have you learned about your offense so far, and what do you expect to see moving forward, and who are some of those players that will lead your offense moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is we've just struggled to find that consistency. But I think coming in, we're learning. I think we're used to being, the underdog, right? And I think with what we've done and the team we had coming back, I think we had a little bit of a bullseye on our back where we weren't necessarily sneaking up on people this year. And it didn't matter who was on our schedule. People were saving their number ones, against us. And I think that's something we take as a compliment. But we've seen a lot of great arms. I think we've really struggled with consistency. I mean, really the biggest issue that we've had is we just haven't hit well with runners in scoring position. And I think it's something we've really focused on practice and really working on improving. But yeah, I mean, we deliberately went out and challenged this team with this schedule. I mean, we told these guys, this isn't going to be a record where we roll into conference where we've got this gaudy record, but we still think we could potentially be the best team in the league. And just looking back on it, and again, I think this just ties to the time that I've had here. I mean, I think in years past, we've had, a lot of our preseason schedule, we're playing a lot of teams from the Northeast, and nothing against, teams from the Northeast, but they're coming out of the gym and getting on the field for the first time. And I just feel like sometimes we got into a very tough ASUN conference slate and maybe necessarily hadn't seen those top flight elite teams to where we kind of got off to slow starts in conference and things like that. So we deliberately scheduled to where, we're looking at home and home, obviously with UCF, and we just made that recent adjustment, but that's what, we had planned on. And, we were looking at doing the same thing with Florida, home and home. And just really challenging this team, going out west, playing at Arizona State, playing a whole, group of teams that we've really never played before. Really just focusing on challenging this team so that when we got into a very good ASUN conference that we would be fully prepared for it.
Well, and I'm going to mention Omaha. You're playing Omaha up there, and
Mm.
they got one of the best arms in the country. And Meyer led them to the NCAA tournament last year. And that's the thing. You're very creative in your scheduling in that. You've got Omaha on the schedule. They're an NCAA tournament team. Maris, you're going to host with Joe Asanio. They're an NCAA tournament team. So even some teams that maybe don't stand out, Major, but you know how to create some intriguing matchups to challenge yourself playing some teams not just in the Power Five like Arizona State, but you got Omaha, JMU's in that field. You got Marist coming at home. You got a USC Upstate still to come at home. So
Yeah.
you challenge yourself not just with Power Five teams, but some of the top mid-major teams with talent there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and Harvard, right? An NCAA
Yeah.
tournament team, from we just played this past weekend. I mean, I have a very good team. I mean, they, obviously beat Iowa as well, and we had a really good game with them. And, I don't know. I mean, I'm a super competitive person. I just want to play the best of the best. And I think our team really embraces that challenge. But I think with our league, I think our league is a little bit of an undervalued league. I think the depth and quality of our league is pretty good, and I think in order to be successful in our conference, you have to go out and schedule that way. I mean, even if you look at right with what Shelley's done at Stetson, like their scheduling model now is very different from what it used to be. Now you see the Floridas, you see the Marylands, you see Florida State and things like that, and I think it's really just a credit to our league and how good the league is. And you have to be able to schedule that way in your preseason to be prepared to compete in our conference.
You mentioned Shelley. Yeah, she just scheduled Oklahoma State and then added Washington for a doubleheader.
Yeah.
I told Shelley,
Well,
Shelley, are you okay?
yeah. Well, I thought I lost my mind when I agreed to a second game with Florida, and then I saw that and I felt a little bit better about
but
things.
but they played well. They
Yeah.
had Oklahoma State on the ropes there. They had
Yeah.
Washington. I mean, they played well, and that's challenger schedule. And you've been vocal and rightfully so about the conference. You've got a lot of pride
Mhm.
for the ASUN. You feel it's undervalued. You feel it doesn't get the respect. It's been a consistent top 8 league, top 10
Yeah.
league,
Yeah.
consistently in the RPI. Last year finally was a multi-bid league, which I know is something that's talking to the coaches in the league. That's something you all believe should be on a consistent pace there. What's your thoughts on the league this year? Obviously, no liberty, but always kind of in fluid, but still a lot of depth. And I get a sense in talking to coaches this year, they feel that it's as wide open as they can remember it from top to bottom. Anybody can beat anybody on a given weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's what you're going to see. I mean, I think there's a lot of parity. I think wide open is the best way to put it. I mean, I think you could probably pull, 5 to 6 names out of a hat and make a realistic case for them potentially being the conference champion. I think it's a league that has really good depth, really good talent, really good coaching. There's just no easy weekends in this league. And um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we did obviously the preseason coaches poll, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at these teams, and I'm like, it was hard to narrow down who's the top team, and I think, Central Arkansas, obviously rightfully so, as the reigning champion until somebody knocks them off, deserves that position. And they obviously, losing Caleb Beaver and Johnson, is a little bit, of a change in their pitching dynamic and things like that. But, a very well coached team that's, gonna at the end when this is all said and done, I'm sure Central Arkansas is going to very much be a part of that conversation.
Well, I get a sense too. There's probably some depth from the standpoint, especially in the circle in the league. Because I remember when the preseason poll came out, I was surprised of some of the names that were not on the team,
Yeah.
especially pitcher wise, but even position players. Did you sense that too when you saw it? Like, whoa! And I'm not even talking about your own players. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some players on your own team you thought should have gotten recognized, but I'm talking about just players across the league that you're like, wait a minute, that player's just as good. That could have made a case for this, probably more than from that depth standpoint.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I do think one of the things that makes those types of things with the early season voting in our league very challenging is, we don't have divisions, so we don't play everyone. Like I'm sitting here and they're asking me to rank Austin P. Well, I've never played Austin P. All I know is what do their box scores look like against other teams, or I'm trying to vote for a conference preseason pitcher of the year, and I've never seen their pitching in person. Queens is a team we've never played. We get to play both of those teams this year, but I do think that's another thing that makes it very challenging. I mean, obviously I've been outspoken about some of the kids on our own team. Shannon Glover, I think, is as good a player as there is in the ASUN conference. And here's a kid that's, doesn't really get a whole lot of thought, I think, when it comes to conference player of the year, who very well should. And then she's just one example. I mean, I'm sure there's a kid like that on every team, but yeah, it's a very, very good league. I mean, and I think it's it's one of the things that I think all the schools within the conference do a great job, from a recruiting standpoint, is selling the quality of softball that's played in our league.
You mentioned Glover. Let's stay with her. I would assume she's one of your leaders on this team, not just offensively. What does she bring to the table offensively? You got Culp as well. You got some other pieces there that you like as well.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon, I always tell people, I mean, to me, Shannon is the epitome of what a UNF softball player is. I mean, she's a kid that wasn't the most highly recruited kid. Just, showed up, was very coachable, just works really hard. You won't find a kid in the country that's going to outwork her. So really just really love her intangibles, and I think she's done a really good job stepping into a leadership role here for our group as a fifth-year senior. Chloe Culp, obviously you mentioned, transferred in last semester, or I should say mid-semester last year from Florida State. Obviously, has that postseason experience, the pedigree. She's been through those grinds, maybe not playing as much there as she has here, but I think just, knowing what it takes to compete in the postseason, I think was a very important element for us to add. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Allison. She kind of has that same pedigree coming from Oregon, super regional team. And I think those three are as formidable a three as you're going to find in the middle of a lineup in the ASUN. I mean, and we really haven't had that game where all three of them are clicking. Right now, we get one from, we get a third of them, for one game, and then it's somebody else the next game. So I think, when we really hit our stride and we start really getting on a run, I think that's going to be a big focal point of that, is going to be those three all, working in unison. I mean, those have been, really, big pieces of the middle of our lineup. I'll tell you, if you want me to speak a little bit just about some other kids that have really emerged. I mean, Maddie Federico is a kid who transferred in last year from Virginia Tech, who didn't play a whole lot for us last year, was kind of more in a pinch run role, really just an elite runner. I mean, we're talking like track quality speed on the softball field. Really just, I think, needed to learn to become more of a complete hitter. And she's really taken that next step this year. She's been our leadoff hitter. She's also leading our team in home runs. I think she's hitting over 300 at the time. I want to say like 12 for 12 in stolen bases. Really been a great catalyst for the top of our lineup. Really athletic kid in center field. I mean, just like I said earlier, high level runner. But she's really become more of a complete hitter this year, which I think has really kind of helped her role expand for us. The two kids that, would probably be familiar names that I think have really elevated their games, that we really kind of challenged to take the next step, would be Logan Jackson and Savannah Chanel, the transfer from Liberty. Savannah's always been, she's always kind of looked at herself as, an elite defensive player and a high level defensive shortstop. And, I don't think she's really viewed herself as much as being an offensive, type player. And she's got a really good skill set. And I think she's really worked hard at becoming more of an offensive player. I don't know where she's at after the weekend, but I know she was over 300 going into the weekend. She's really elevated, her game. Logan Jackson, like I mentioned earlier, has been, someone who's been in the program now for 5 years, and probably within the last couple years hasn't become really a consistent starter for us until then. But she's been someone who's really kind of jumped into that middle of the lineup and been a run producer for us, and really just consistently been swinging the bat well. So those are two kids that I think have really kind of taken the next step. That's really kind of helped our program. If we're going to get to where we want to be, we need some of those kids to elevate, and they've done a really good job doing that.
You mentioned earlier about the conference and some of the scheduling there, and in fact, the conference tournament being in a neutral site, which means you could, by the way, you could be a co-host for a podcast anytime, because you know you know the topics that are coming before I even bring them up. But give the audience, but maybe they're not following it closely, the what went into the decision to have now the conference tournament held in a neutral site, basically, in Alabama, and then the scheduling formula moving forward, because you don't play everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I had heard about for a couple years, that it was potentially going to become a neutral site type thing, and I had heard different things. I know there was a location somewhere in Atlanta, I believe, that had been talked about. And then obviously with it moving to Alabama this year, I thought the timing of it was kind of interesting. I mean, Jacksonville State leaves the league this year, and then the tournament moves to right in their backyard. So I thought that was kind of interesting from a timing standpoint. We had, ever since Jacksonville State's been in the league, we had been going there every year. I don't know if it's just a scheduling quirk with the ASUN or what, but that started to feel like our second home away from home, going to Jacksonville State every year. So we kind of thought with them being gone, we were done, and then we find out the conference tournament's there, and we got to go right back again. Hopefully this year if we make it, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see if you're asking me whether or not I like it or not. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what it's like. I mean, I guess it's kind of evens out the playing field a little bit for everyone. I mean, I know we benefited a couple years ago from finally hosting the tournament and being able to play at home. And, I definitely think that's an advantage to when you can sleep in your own bed and play a tournament, especially when you figure it's, over the course of 3 or 4 days where your team's got to be, on top of their game. I think playing at home is a huge advantage. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see going forward. Is it something that everyone likes? Does it return to campus sites? And how does it, play out? Obviously, Amber, that was her home last year for the Pro League, so she's very familiar with it. So, maybe if any team's going to have a little bit of an advantage in going there, maybe it'll be us, just from, Amber's familiarity with the area and the stadium and the location and everything.
Yeah, she knows that park well. Obviously, playing in there, the WPF championships were held there as well. So
Yeah.
that will be fascinating from that standpoint. Moving forward, the future. How does the conference scheduling look like in the future? Because that will impact. And the reason I ask that, because that does impact your non-conference scheduling as well, depending on how the conference scheduling formula goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we just recently received, a brief rundown of what the schedule is going to look like for next year. And I don't have it committed to memory yet, but I think it's still the same format of what we're looking at, this year. A little bit of, that rotating schedule type model. It's interesting that ASUN has become a little more challenging from a traveling standpoint. Obviously we extend, up north all the way to Louisville, Kentucky now with Bellarmine in the league, and then, going down south with Central Arkansas. I mean, that's a place that we went to last year, is not a very easy place to get to. And, I know they came here the year before and kind of said the same thing. It's, from a traveling standpoint, it's got its challenges. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think from that standpoint, where everything's so spread out, there's probably some merit to looking at divisions, because you do have, obviously Kennesaw is leaving after this year, but you do have a populace of teams here in the state of Florida. I think is it West Georgia that's joining the league, next year. So I think you could probably look at some type of format with divisions. But I also know one of the things that the coaches in the conference do feel, important is, being able to play everyone. So it just becomes very challenging, I think, when you split into divisions and different things to get everybody on the schedule, but we're having those similar challenges now. So I think kind of it's probably something that, as a conference, we probably really need to take a deep dive and look at and see what's the best formula moving forward.
I think you've described just about every major conference. That if every coach has told me the same thing, as these conferences get bigger and different geography gets different, wider, it's just welcome to college athletics 2024.
Yeah, I guess I'm complaining about having to go to Central Arkansas, right? And UCLA is trying to figure out how to get to Rutgers. So, I mean, I guess in the grand scheme, my complaints aren't as valid as what theirs are. But you're right. I mean, that's the landscape of college athletics these days, and obviously, a lot of that's driven by college football.
College football. It's a good segue. See, I'm telling you, you got the podcast down. For those that obviously you've been on frequently on our show, people are quite familiar. We've talked about it. You're a Michigan fan. You have Michigan blood. Your sister played there's one of the greats of all time. Which, by the way, we still got to set it up where you and her come on the pod at the same time. And if she comes to the in Orlando to the UCF game, she better visit the press box. But
yeah. Would just make you got to do the one thing that my mom will tell you is a stipulation. If you're going to do that, is you're going to have referees on the call, because you put two two competitive people into a same call, it's
Okay,
gonna get
we can
you're
make
gonna
that
have to have
work.
some referees to keep the
I like
peace.
it. We can make that work. We can arrange something there. We can sanction it. I like that. So people are quite familiar. You're a Michigan fan. You're a big football fan. Obviously, you've grown up. I mean, people, you've told the story when you've been on before. You worked at one point in the Michigan in the media relations side and things like that. What was it like for you to see Michigan win a national title? You were there. I believe you went to Houston to
Yeah.
watch them beat Washington in the national title game. I don't think you went to the Rose Bowl, but it was a heck of a run, beating Alabama in overtime and then beating Washington for the national title.
Yeah, it was, I mean, really what a tremendous season. I mean, just to be a fan, obviously, of the program, and obviously I'm biased, but I think really one of the things that was really special was just looking at the way a group of college kids handled such adversity, from start to finish to, the scandal with the cheating and the scouting and all that stuff. And, just keeping that focus. And then they're on a plane going to Penn State, and then they land, and then they find out Jim's suspended for the next 3 games, and everybody's already saying, well, here's, Michigan hasn't played anybody. Penn State's the big stumbling block. And then you get off the plane and find out you got to figure out a way to do it without your head coach. But really just had an admiration, obviously, for the way those group of kids just handled adversity and just were united by a singular goal. And I think they were focused. And there's a lot of things that we talk to our kids about. I mean, our kids, they know my love for Michigan. They know I was at the game, and and stuff like that. I mean, I got back and they asked me, because there'd be different things throughout the fall. Hey, are we going to do this on Saturday? Or now the Michigan game's on at noon, so they know what my schedule was being built around and different things like that. But when I got back and they were asking me if I was going to get a national championship ring, and I said, well, I felt invested being on there for every game, but no, I wasn't going to. But I mean, there was a lot of things, in watching that team that I think we've spent a lot of time talking to our kids about. I mean, I think that Michigan team, when you look at the kids that came back for an opportunity to win a national championship, kids that could have went and been high draft picks and came back, whether it was Blake Corum or, some of the guys on the offensive line and, things like that. I mean, we've got kids that came back for a COVID year for an opportunity to win a championship, so we talked a lot about the correlations of that with our kids, being focused on a singular goal and letting that drive you every day, letting that be the thing that fuels you when you're too tired to get up and do it again the next morning, is that you came back for a reason, and this is what the reason is. And even it's funny when the kids got off the plane at Penn State, and I think it was JJ McCarthy put out the tweet that just simply said bet, because everybody was counting them out when Jim got suspended. And when the preseason poll came out, and I think we were picked sixth, and we're sitting there amongst coaches, and we just kind of had a grin on our face, because I think we knew we were better than what the perception was. Obviously, we still got to go out and prove it on the field. But Amber's first response was to put out a tweet that
She
said bet.
did. Yeah, I was gonna bring it up. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, yeah. So just a lot of things indirectly, and obviously a lot of it has to do with my influence. Just talking a lot of, I think there were a lot of things that we were able to pull from that team and that team's focus that we've talked to our kids about. And it's something that our kids have rallied, around. Amber put out that tweet, and every single kid on our team within a couple minutes was liking it, because they fed off of stuff like that, and it's been really good. I mean, we've got, like I said, a really good group of kids that love, I think, being a part of this program and really cherish the opportunity to go out and create history. I mean, it's one of the things. We talked about the Allison Benning recruitment earlier in the process. I mean, that's one of the things I told her. I said, come here and let's shock the world. Every year there's a team, a mid-major team that surfaces that everybody's kind of like, where did this team come from? And trying to convince our kids, why can't that be us? And I don't know. I feel really good about where we're at and what we've done. I think we're better than what our record, at this point, not that there's anything wrong with 9-5. I think we're better than what that record shows. And I think it was, you take out the two Florida games, I think we've got two of our three losses are by one run. So, I mean, we're a competitive group that has big goals, and I think is going to be a really determined group from now through the end of ASUN play.
That's good. And then obviously you were in Houston. Was there a part of you that wished that Michigan Washington game was at the Rose Bowl instead of Houston, or were you fine with being in Houston, Texas?
I was fine with it being in Houston. I felt like that would have really created and Michigan obviously travels well. I mean, there's Michigan fans everywhere. So, I mean, but I felt like playing, if we had to play Washington in the Rose Bowl, it would have been maybe a little bit of a closer home field advantage for Washington. I mean, that was a decision the wife and I really struggled with. I mean, because it's such a financial investment to the college football playoffs, right? Like how people are making a trip out to Pasadena and then the following week making a trip out to Houston for a national championship. So that's something that fits it within
So
my
what?
tax.
So what'd you do? You just hope they win the semi. If you felt, hey, if you win the semi, you're going to the finals. Is that what you decided?
Yeah, that's what we decided. So the previous couple years we went with the semifinal. We're like, let's go to the semifinal, and then if they make it to the championship, we'll put a mortgage up on the house. We'll figure it out. But this year we were kind of like, like the so the interesting element was, so I turned 50 this year. So we went out to Vegas for my 50th birthday. And my birthday's in January, but obviously the season's going on. We're practicing, so we celebrated it in December. So we were actually out in Vegas the week before, before the Rose Bowl, and we just kind of felt like, after being out in Vegas for a week, coming back, there was no way we could fly back out to the Rose Bowl, and then if they make it to the national championship. So it was kind of we got to decide to do one or the other, and we just said, well, let's be different this year, and let's put all our eggs in the basket of trying to go to Houston. And even that becomes a tricky thing, right? Because all the hotels change their arrangements to where you can't cancel your hotel. So we're sitting here like, when do we reserve a hotel? And I mean, obviously that final minute as Alabama's, driving down the field at the Rose Bowl, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this isn't about to happen, is it? And obviously the fourth down play, and Milrow goes up the middle, and obviously they stuff him, and I think I blacked out at that point, because I don't remember what happened after than that, other than I just remember we had flights that we had to by that night cancel or do something with, and we had a hotel that we had to do something with, and thankfully it worked out, and we got to go down there, and we were there for 3 or 4 days, saw a lot of friends, and got a it's always a great experience for me. Obviously I love being there and being around Michigan football and stuff, but with the connections that I have and the people there, being able to get behind the scenes and see how they're doing things, and conducting business is a huge thing for me. I mean, literally just, I spend as much time as I'm at the team hotel, associating with friends that are part of the program or whatever, and I'm conversing with them, but I'm watching Jim. What is he doing, or how is he doing things, and and stuff like that. Just kind of taking it all in. So, just great opportunity to be around that stuff, and very grateful for those opportunities and friendships.
What I've enjoyed about this process of you trying to figure out how to just to get to the national title game, this isn't a 14 playoff. Imagine now we're going to go to 12, 14. How the heck
Yeah.
are people going to travel for these games?
Yeah, it's. I mean, as a college football lover, I love it, right? I mean, think about a 12-team format, the games we're going to get every week. When you have the top 10, the top 12 teams going, competing. But yeah, I mean, for the fan, how that's when you start factoring in campus site games before you get into bowl games and things like that, and I don't know how that's going to be affordable when you have that many rounds. But I'm one of those people that, when college football ends, it's not like, oh well, the NFL's here. I mean, I'm one of those that mourns college football being over. So anything that can extend it, by a couple of weeks, I'm all for.
All right, all right. I'll remember you said that when I hit you up.
Yeah.
When Michigan's in the quarter. Hey, you going to the quarters?
Yeah.
And then you figuring out, actually, I can. There's a little
Yeah.
challenging there, but what are you going to do?
Well, with my luck, it'll be a snowy December day in the big house at negative 20 degrees,
Oh,
and
that's
that in
right.
itself will keep me away.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I'll let you go on this. As you move forward now, you're going to go to Tempe. We've talked about the challenging schedule moving forward, going out west, and then before you know it, conference play. What are going to be a couple keys or goals? A couple keys for this team here moving forward to have the success you all have internally, goal wise.
So I think one of the things I mentioned earlier, just the big three in the middle of our lineup. I think them forming that continuity to where they're kind of feeding off of one another on a more consistent basis is going to be big for us. I think the emergence of the third arm in our pitching staff. I'm if we can get that third arm to emerge, I mean, we may be in a situation where we could have three different starters going into conference weekends, which obviously having three different looks would be a huge plus, but also the longevity when you get into conference tournament, the less games they've thrown, the less teams have seen them multiple times, things like that. So I think those are some of the things that we're really looking to as the next couple of weeks go through in terms of, our program continuing to not only get better each week, but just continue to build towards that end goal, which is to be that first UNF team to step foot in a regional.
Well, I look forward to seeing your team play. We're going to see them here in a little bit in April, but in the meantime, obviously, I'll be following you closely. You'll be out west this weekend, folks. Encourage people to follow along all season. Jeff Conrad, UNF head coach, Michigan fan on the side as well. Ranger fan hockey. We're not even going to get into that because that could get now. You talk about refereeing. I mean, if the
Yeah.
Panthers and the Rangers are playing in the playoffs, we're not talking at that point.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
done.
I know you remember that 2015 bus ride to Tallahassee where I'm trying to keep up with the Rangers
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
can we get this bus to the hotel before the third period's over?
We've spent many a times watching Ranger playoff games. I think we were at we watched a Ranger Capital game one time too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it was a
Absolutely.
selection. It's
Yeah.
been wild, but hey,
Yeah.
always appreciate catching up with you. It's always a blast to see you and doing well, and I root for you and look forward to seeing you soon here when you guys make your trip to Orlando. But in the meantime, good luck between now and then, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks. Yeah, always great having it on and really appreciate everything you do for our sport. I think it's you're obviously starting to get some of that recognition and it's well deserved. I think that's without question one of the better people in the industry.
And by the way, you mentioned we can't leave without a shout out to the new UCF Hall of Famer, Shelby Turner. You mentioned you offered her the deal. She's become a Midwesterner now. That's
She
the
has,
problem.
yeah.
She's no longer a Floridian. She's a
That's
Midwesterner, but
right.
she's also now a Hall of Famer, which I know you were
Yeah.
excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that and it's funny too. The other, I forget what they call him. Was it shake and bake? Is that what they
Shake and
called
bake,
him?
yeah.
Yeah. So obviously I, coached here with Shelby and have always been in contact with her ever since. And the other half of Shake and Bake, Audis, have been in contact with her recently. She had reached out because she's doing a lot with pitchers up in the Tampa area and stuff like that. And she's been reaching out, just kind of recommending different arms and different things that she's been working with. So it's crazy how the connections from that 2015 I think is something that'll last a lifetime. And I know I'm forever grateful for that year with that group.
Well, I can't wait to you when next time you're at the Plex, you're going to recognize a couple of those arms you just referenced. They're
Yeah.
being showcased in the Plex very well. I'll make sure
Yeah.
you see that. You can take a photo and send it to Shelby and say, where are you?
Yeah. I've got a ring in my closet downstairs thanks to those guys, and hoping this group this year can help put another one on my finger.
We definitely will. I think you got a good team there. Thanks, Jeff, for always doing this.
Okay, buddy. Thanks.